The sun filtered through the tall windows of the therapy room, casting sharp rectangles of light across the immaculate white walls. Claire sat stiffly in the plush leather chair opposite Dr. Helena Voss, the lead psychiatrist whose reputation for piercing insight was whispered about among patients and staff alike. Her blue eyes were calm but unyielding as they fixed on Claire, probing beneath the surface. "Tell me again about the nature of your addiction, Doctor," Voss said, voice smooth but insistent. Claire's throat tightened. She had rehearsed this story countless times, half-truth woven with enough detail to convince, but vague enough to avoid scrutiny. "It's prescription pills," she said carefully, meeting the doctor's gaze. "Painkillers mostly. After an injury." Dr. Voss nodded slowly, her fingers steepled in contemplation. "And how long have you been struggling with this?" "Nearly a year," Claire replied, her voice steady despite the tightening knot in her stomach. The doctor's eyes flickered briefly, as if measuring the weight behind Claire's words. "Withdrawal symptoms." Claire nodded, forcing herself to recall the textbook signs she'd researched. Insomnia, nausea, irritability. As the session progressed, Claire felt the shadows of doubt creeping into her carefully crafted story. The questions were surgical, designed not just to understand but to unsettle, to peel away the layers of denial patients often cloaked themselves in. She could see the method behind the clinical facade, the subtle psychological probes intended to break down defenses and expose hidden truths. When the session ended, Claire rose with a polite nod, but her mind raced. She knew she had to sharpen her act. Any slip could unravel everything. In the hallway, Nurse Marla observed Claire's retreating figure with a curious mix of warmth and wariness. The nurse's gentle smile didn't quite reach her eyes, which flicked to a clipboard held tightly in her hands. Claire caught the glance and forced a brief, polite smile in return, aware that every interaction was being catalogued. Later that afternoon, the group therapy session brought a different kind of challenge. The room was arranged in a circle, soft voices filling the space as patients shared their stories, fractured confessions that bled vulnerability. Claire listened, the weight of their pain pressing against the polished veneer of the rehab. When it was her turn, Claire rehearsed calmness, speaking in measured tones about her fabricated struggles. But beneath the surface, a flicker of panic surfaced. How long before the cracks in her story showed? How long before someone saw through the veil? After the session, she retreated to her room, the silence a refuge from the controlled chaos outside. The city lights spilled through the window, casting long, restless shadows. Claire spread out her note snippets of overheard conversations, behavioral observations, and her own reflections. The patterns were emerging, psychological manipulations masked as therapy, subtle controls woven into the fabric of daily life here. She realized the rehab was not just a place for healing but a battleground of wills, where power was exercised beneath the silk-smooth surface, and addiction was both a weapon and a cage. As night deepened, Claire's resolve hardened. Her sister's disappearance was entwined with these dark methods, and to uncover the truth, she would have to navigate this treacherous labyrinth without losing herself for her carefully crafted disguise. The veil of addiction was thinner than she thought, and the stakes far higher. But Claire had no choice. The game was just beginning, and the true cost of her deception had yet to be revealed. The luxury rehab, with its polished marble floors and carefully curated art, concealed a ruthless hierarchy that dictated not only treatment but survival. The revelation came on a day when the usual calm of the center was punctuated by hushed whispers and furtive glances. Victor Harrington, a man whose reputation preceded him, held court in a secluded lounge reserved for the elite. Claire had seen him before. His presence was magnetic and intimidating, a wolf in cashmere. She lingered at the periphery, pretending to adjust the hem of her blouse while her eyes darted around, cataloguing the players in this dangerous game. Victor's voice was low but commanding as he spoke to a small group of patients who hung on his every word. They were not here for recovery, but for influence, trading favors and secrets like currency. Claire understood then that her mission to find her sister was entangled in these webs of power, and any misstep could be fatal. Later, in the sterile corridors lined with soft lighting, Lena Morales appeared like a shadow slipping through the silence. Her approach was deliberate, each step measured. Lena was Victor's closest confidant, the gatekeeper who filtered access to the inner circle. She stopped in front of Claire, her eyes gleaming with suspicion and amusement. "You're new," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "but not new enough to not understand the rules. Loyalty is currency here, and we're not generous with it." Claire forced a smile, feeling a cold sweat prick at her temples. This was a test, a veiled warning that she couldn't afford to ignore. She nodded, careful to keep her tone steady. "I'm here to heal, like everyone else." "Healing," Lena echoed, her smirk widening. "Depends on your definition." With that, she vanished down the hallway, leaving Claire alone with the echo of her words. The next day, Claire found herself in Dr. Simon Reed's office. The psychiatrist had been observing her, his gaze clinical but laced with something deeper concern or calculation, she couldn't tell. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old books. He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You're walking a fine line, Claire. This place isn't just about addiction, it's about control, and the players you're dealing with don't like to lose." Claire met his eyes, unflinching. "I'm aware, be careful. The deeper you go, the more isolated you become. Trust is a scarce commodity here." His words lingered as Claire left, the warning settling in her bones. She realized that trust was not a gift she could afford to give or receive lightly. That evening, the rehab hosted a discreet gathering in the grand lounge facade of civility, where the powerful mingled behind polite smiles and clinking glasses. Claire navigated the crowd, her senses heightened. Soft jazz floated through the air, blending with the subtle scent of expensive perfume and aged whiskey. Conversations were layered with double meanings, alliances forged and broken beneath the veneer of camaraderie. Victor was there, his presence magnetic as ever. Claire approached cautiously, aware that every word, every glance, was a move on this invisible chessboard. She needed to earn her place, to learn the rules of this perilous game without revealing her true purpose. Each interaction was a test of wit and will. Claire found herself drawn into whispered exchanges, her smile masking the storm of calculation beneath. She realized that to find her sister, to survive, she had to become a player in this deadly game, not just a pawn. But the deeper she delved, the clearer it became that the stakes were higher than she imagined. The rehab was not just a sanctuary for the broken, it was a battleground for power. And every secret uncovered brought her closer to danger. As the night wore on, Claire's resolve hardened. She would navigate these treacherous waters, no matter the cost. The game was on, and losing was not an option. Claire lingered in the lounge, a place where silk curtains draped luxuriously over tall windows, and the polished marble floors reflected the dimmed chandeliers like cold stars. Her eyes scanned the room, keenly aware of every shadow, every whispered conversation that might carry a hidden meaning. It was late, the kind of late where the facade of the rehab began to crack, and truths long buried might surface. She sipped her herbal tea, the warmth doing little to settle the nervous flutter in her chest. Every day here was a balancing act, keeping her fabricated addiction believable while peeling away layers of deception that shrouded the center. The missing pieces of her sister's disappearance haunted her thoughts, and tonight, more than ever, Claire felt she was on the cusp of something significant. From across the room, a familiar figure slipped through the half-open door. Vivian, with her platinum hair cascading like a halo around her face, moved with a deliberate grace. Her silk scarf trailed behind her, whispering secrets against the polished floor. Claire straightened slightly, curiosity piqued. Vivian was an enigma, one of the few patients who seemed to know more than she let on, her sharp eyes reflecting a wary intelligence. Vivian approached quietly, her voice a hushed murmur in the stillness. "Claire," she said, her tone layered with urgency, "we need to talk. Somewhere private." The invitation was unexpected, but welcome. Claire nodded, allowing Vivian to lead her to a shadowed corner of the lounge where the glow of the city's nightlights barely reached. The air felt heavier here, charged with unspoken truths. "There's something you need to know about Dr. Langston," Vivian began, her gaze darting nervously toward the surveillance cameras that occasionally blinked red from their perches. "He's not the man everyone thinks he is." Claire's heart quickened. Dr. Langston was the rehab's founder, a man revered by staff and patients alike, his silver hair and calm demeanor a symbol of safety and healing. But Vivian's words hinted at a darker reality. "What do you mean?" Claire whispered, leaning in. Vivian's eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Langston's past is riddled with exploitation, using the facility as a front for something far more sinister. Vulnerable patients, like your sister, aren't here to heal. They're pawns in a game of power and profit." The rooms seemed to close in, the plush surroundings suddenly suffocating. Claire's mind raced, connecting fragments of overheard conversations and the odd behaviors she'd observed. Could this be the reason her sister vanished without a trace? "How do you know this?" Claire pressed, voice tight. Vivian hesitated, then pulled a small, folded document from inside her jacket. "I found this in a restricted area. Financial records, communication logs, evidence that ties Langston to powerful people outside these walls." Claire's fingers brushed over the paper, the weight of its implications settling deep within her. This was no longer just a search for a missing person. It was a battle against an unseen enemy entrenched in the very heart of the rehab. As the conversation deepened, Claire felt a shift inside her. The controlled chaos of the rehab was not random, it was orchestrated. And now, armed with Vivian's revelation, she understood the stakes had escalated beyond anything she had imagined. The night grew colder as Claire stepped out onto the terrace, the city skyline a glittering expanse of secrets and lies. The silk-soft facade of the rehab had been pierced, exposing the darkness beneath. Yet, with this newfound knowledge came danger, and she knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril. Her sister's shadow loomed larger than ever, entwined with the threads of betrayal and power that held the rehab captive. Claire's resolve hardened. She would not be silenced. The game had changed, and so had she. The night whispered promises of revelations to come, and Claire was ready to listen. But as the door closed behind her, the faintest sound of footsteps echoed someone was watching. The secrets under silk were not willing to be uncovered without a fight. Claire's mind replayed Vivian's words over and over, each one a chisel striking at the polished image of the rehab. The more she thought about it, the more everything she'd seen, the veiled glances, the hushed meetings, the sudden silences made sense. The rehab was a gilded cage, and she was inside, trying to find a way out. She knew the risks of trusting Vivian, Alliances here were as fragile as the silk scarves that adorned the patients, but the alternative, remaining in ignorance, was unthinkable. Her sister's fate depended on uncovering the truth, no matter how dark or twisted it became. As dawn approached, Claire retreated to her room, the city lights fading into the morning haze. Her thoughts were a storm of fear and determination. Somewhere in this luxury prison, the answers awaited, and she would find them, even if it meant tearing apart the very fabric of the rehab's silk-soft lies. The game was far from over. The elegant chandeliers cast fractured reflections on the polished mahogany floor, and the murmurs of the wealthy patients mingled with the soft clink of crystal glasses. Yet, amid this veneer of leisure, Claire's instincts screamed that something was amiss. Evan's movements were too measured, too deliberate. She had noticed him slipping a folded note into his pocket moments after a brief, hushed exchange with one of the staff members, a woman with a practiced smile but eyes that betrayed a calculating edge. The note was small, but its significance loomed large in Claire's mind. She shifted in her seat, heart pounding not from fear but from the sting of betrayal's possibility. Evan had been her closest ally in this gilded cage, a patient whose charm and apparent candor had earned her fragile trust. Now, that trust wavered on a knife's edge. Later that evening, while the rehab center's corridors echoed with the soft footsteps of late-night wanderers, Claire found herself drawn to the shadowed hallway near the therapy rooms. There, voices whispered, frantic and low. Mara, her quiet confidant, huddled with another patient, their faces etched with fear and urgency. "Evan's been seen meeting with staff after hours," Mara said, her voice barely above her breath. "They say he's feeding them information about us." Claire's stomach tightened. The paranoia she'd tried so hard to suppress now surged like wildfire. The rehab was no sanctuary. It was a chessboard where every piece moved with hidden intent. Determined to confront the truth, Claire arranged to meet Evan in the secluded garden under the moon's pale glow. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass, a deceptive calm that belied the tension threading through the space between them. Evan stood by the wrought iron bench, his silhouette sharp against the manicured hedges. When Claire approached, his usual easy smile faltered, replaced by a guarded expression. "Claire," he began, voice low, "this place, it's not what it seems. You need to be careful who you trust." She searched his eyes, looking for the honesty she once believed in. "Then why the secrecy? Why the notes?" He hesitated, then sighed. "It's bigger than either of us. If you want to survive here, you learn to play along or you don't last." The weight of his words settled uneasily. Was he warning her or manipulating her? The lines blurred, and Claire realized that in this game, trust was a currency few could afford. The following day, group therapy brought its own trials. Dr. Lillian Marsh presided with an unsettling calm, her silver-streaked hair gleaming under the soft lights. Her questions, though measured and polite, carried the weight of an interrogation. "So, Claire," Dr. Marsh's gaze pierced through the room, "how are you finding your relationships here? Trust is essential to recovery, but it's also fragile, isn't it?" Claire forced a steady smile, feeling the invisible eyes of the staff and patients alike. Each word was a test, each response a potential misstep. As the session progressed, Claire's mind raced. The fractures in her alliance with Evan had splintered her sense of safety. Now, surrounded by silken secrets, she was alone in a sea of veiled threats and whispered betrayals. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass. Yet despite the sensory richness surrounding her, an icy coldness gripped her heart. Her mind drifted unbidden, slipping through the years like a ghost revisiting a home long abandoned. She saw them both there, two girls by the lake that had been their sanctuary, the water shimmering with the golden hues of sunset. The laughter of her sister, Alina, ringing clear and bright. Alina had always been the wild one, the flame to Claire's cautious ember. Her smile had the power to light up the darkest rooms, and her rebellious spirit had drawn trouble like moths to a flame. But she was also the sister Claire had loved fiercely, the one she'd lost and now hunted. The memory twisted painfully as the scene shifted to their last argument. Years ago, but etched into Claire's heart with brutal clarity. Words had been exchanged in anger, sharp and unforgiving. Words that had pushed Alina away just before everything spiraled out of control. Claire's chest tightened at the recollection, the weight of guilt pressing down like a stone. The harsh fluorescent lights of the group therapy room yanked Claire back to the present. Dr. Reynolds's calm voice cut through the stale air, probing gently but firmly. Claire's facade wavered for a moment. The carefully constructed mask of the struggling addict threatened to crack. She clenched her fists beneath the table, fighting to steady her breath as eyes studied her, some sympathetic, others suspicious. The sterile room, the hushed whispers, the subtle glances, all felt like a cage tightening around her. After the session, Claire retreated to the rehab's library, a quiet sanctuary lined with shelves, heavy with leather-bound tomes and glossy magazines. Her fingers traced the spines until they paused on a worn book tucked away in a forgotten corner. As she opened it, a folded piece of aged paper slipped out, its edges frayed and yellowed. The note bore a cryptic message, its ink faded but still legible beneath the silk. The truth waits to be unraveled. Trust no one but the shadows. A shiver ran down Claire's spine as she folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket. The shadows gathering in the room seemed to deepen, the silence swelling with the weight of unseen eyes. The rehab's polished veneer suddenly felt fragile, threatening to shatter beneath the pressure of secrets too long buried. Later that evening, in the dim glow of the lounge's fireplace, Claire found herself seated beside Martin, whose presence was at once comforting and enigmatic. The crackling flames painted their faces in flickering light, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. They spoke in hushed tones, their conversation a careful dance of trust and guarded truths. Martin's knowledge of the rehab's inner workings hinted at alliances and betrayals lurking beneath the surface. As Claire shared fragments of her past and the mysterious note, she sensed a shift, a tentative alliance forming that could either be a lifeline or a trap. The room felt charged with a fragile hope, yet the unspoken threat of discovery lingered like a spectre. Night deepened outside, wrapping the rehab in a cloak of silence. But inside, Claire's resolve hardened. The echoes of the past no longer whispered just of loss. They called her toward a reckoning, a confrontation with shadows that stretched far beyond her sister's disappearance. In this place where silk-masked chaos and power games played out behind polished smiles, Claire's journey was just beginning. But as the embers sputtered low, a single question burned bright in her mind. How deep did the darkness go, and what price would she pay to unearth the truth? The night held its breath, waiting for Claire to decide her next move.